We're all counting down until the polls open, of course. We do have some graphics on the latest polling. Here they are now. Monaro, the primary vote. Labor's Christy McBain currently sitting at 38.1%. The Liberals' Fiona Cott-Voice at 37.5%. Now, in terms of the two-party preferred vote, Labor 52%, the Liberals currently at 48%. Richard, how tight do you think that this will be?
I think this might be one of the most unpredictable by-elections in Australia for a very long time, which is saying something considering the past number of federal elections have often shocked people, which is one of the reasons why perhaps we should take that polling with a pinch of salt. When you talk to both Labour and Liberal MPs, I think it's still fair to say that Labour are considered the favourite, probably just because of history and because of the bushfires, etc. But it is clear that the Liberal Party is a lot more confident than it has been in the past couple of weeks, and that Labour are a lot more scared than they have been. So it will be a fascinating contest tonight. And of course, the big unknown is what will happen with the Nationals' preferences and what will happen with the sugar farmers' preferences, and what role John Barilaro may end up playing in deciding the final outcome. Of course, the Australian reported yesterday that his supporters have been asking Nationals voters to preference Labour over the Liberals, despite their how-to-vote cards. And it was very interesting to see Mr Barilaro this morning on Sky repeatedly refusing to say whether he will personally preference Labour over the Liberals. So it'll be fascinating to see what will happen there. It took only about 13% of Nationals voters to preference a party other than the Liberals to see it lose Monaro at the last federal election. So it really will come down to preferences tomorrow night.
It was interesting comments made by John Barilaro this morning on Sky News. Of course, do you think that this threatens to overrun the vote in the final days? We've seen a lot of infighting from the very beginning when it does come to the Nationals itself. Now, these revelations that, if Labor does win, then it could mean something very good for John Barilaro. Do you think it's had a bit of an overshadow effect?
I think it's definitely it's played a big part in the internal politics of what's going on with this race. The interesting thing will be, does it matter to the voters? Or are the voters more concerned about recovery from the bushfires and this once-in-a-century coronavirus pandemic, which, is affecting their jobs and their livelihoods and their health? At the end of the day, I think that's ultimately what will decide the race. But the ramifications of what happens tomorrow night will be huge internally for both parties, but, especially for Labour. If Labour were to lose this election tomorrow night, then it will have huge ramifications for the leadership of Anthony Albanese. It seems very unlikely that there'll be any move against him, but it will incredibly affect it, considering an opposition has not lost one of their own seats in a by-election to a government in 100 years. Of course, when that last by-election happened 100 years ago, there was a pandemic. So it will be fascinating to see how that plays out.
Let's move on now to another topic, of course, reported in The Australian this morning about a plan to fast-track visas for Hong Kong nationals who are currently fleeing the security crackdown. What do you make of this potential plan?
Well, it will be another fascinating move in our ever-deteriorating relationship with China. Basically, the Australian revealed today that we will use the skilled visa program to resettle these Hong Kong nationals. It's part of a global push which is being led by the UK, who, of course, once ruled Hong Kong until 1997 when they handed it back to China, to offer up to 3 million of their British nationals there, and with people with British overseas passports there in Hong Kong, paths to citizenship because of this huge security clampdown in China, which seems to go against every tenet of the one country, two systems agreement that allowed them to get Hong Kong back in 1997. Scott Morrison and the Cabinet are due to review these plans next week. China has already fired back. The Foreign Ministry in Beijing overnight said that we have to look at the security clampdown in what they called a correct and objective light, and warned Australia against going down the wrong path. it's clear that this will be seen as a provocation, but considering it's a global effort and considering the fact that China has basically decided to run roughshod over the Hong Kong right to self-determination, which was a whole reason that they got it back, was, the promise that the Hong Kong citizens would have their rights maintained. I think there's very little choice here, and I think a lot of people will welcome it. Clearly, the Labour Party's also welcomed Scott Morrison's moves here.
Absolutely. Richard, we also saw this week, of course, that major defence announcement, the issues that are going on in Hong Kong. Is this Australia really standing up and staking its claim in what's been a major international monopoly?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think it's clear that the entire region, and one of the reasons why maybe some of our neighbours have been less critical of the Prime Minister's defence announcement than they may have been in the past, is because of China's huge increase in its defence spending and its presence, especially in the South China Sea. I mean, it was amazing to see Beijing this week saying Australia should avoid an arms race. A country with a 1.2 trillion yuan budget for its defence annually. It's quite an insane thing for them to say, but it is a major move. But we also have to really realize the fact that not only do we have a bigger presence of China, but we're having an ever-decreasing presence of the United States to protect us, especially if Donald Trump were to win the next election. So it's a kind of, there's not really a choice here for Australia.
Absolutely. Richard Ferguson from the Australian newspaper, appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you, Janika.